Hello, today I'm sitting down with Doug, a history major fascinated by ancient Icelandic and Norwegian literature. He loves old stories and how they leave space for interpretation instead of telling you what to feel, and he's one of the most interesting people I know. He's studying full-time to be a history teacher. He also is a tree planter in his spare time. He's one of the deepest thinkers I know, so please enjoy this podcast. What's new and exciting for you? What's new and exciting at the moment?
At the moment, well, I recently have been sending an application to Teachers College, and that's been a current goal of mine at the moment. I'm also working on some papers that I'm hoping to put toward a grad school application in history, because a personal interest of mine is researching Viking history in the North. And yeah, I just think the law is really cool thing about it, and the landscape, and there's some waste ice. So I've been kind of going down a rabbit hole of all of that, writing papers and doing some research. So hopefully that will be enough to get me into grad school, because that will be a really big accomplishment for me, I think.
That's amazing. I'm really curious to know what the research papers are about. Any stories or characters in particular, or what's your lens and perspective that you want to put into these reports?
I think the big thing about this grad school is that I met a professor at University of Calgary, which I was just doing some open studies there, and I was just taking some history classes because I need to get some credits so I could have that as my teachable subject. But I was taking these classes with this professor, and she made it so fun for me, and she kind of showed me that I knew a lot about this subject, and she really inspired me to pursue a grad school application. Unfortunately, I didn't get accepted this fall, but I am going to continue working on it, and hopefully getting into the future. So.
No, that's good. That's actually such a big thing. I think we don't talk about it enough, but it's so common to get rejected from application. How did it feel getting rejected the first time, and what gave you the motivation or the inspiration to get up and try again after that?
Well, I got really encouraging email from the professor I was talking about. She was like, yeah, there was a lot of competition this year. I hope you apply again. And I was like, yeah, I'm open to apply again. I think the biggest thing for me was that this is fun. I just enjoy doing this. If I wasn't accepted, I would just be doing this on my own. So I feel like to do it in a professional setting, like an academic setting, that's really inspiring, because otherwise I'm just, being a crazy person hoarding books and so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like writing a book, being an expert on it, that's really inspiring. That would be something I would be really proud to be a part of. So
that's awesome. I think you've mentioned something. You've mentioned a key. The key is really loving what you do, and you hear it time and time again. Do what you love. It's not about the money. And people say, "Oh, but it is about the money." But I think this is just another story or a case where it really does prove that if it is something you can work in a career where it's something you would do anyways for free, it's a real privilege, as you say. But what did you do in the meantime? When you got rejected from the application process the first time, how did you kind of keep your head up and continue on with some of the work? Did you stay on track with that topic, or your projects involved in that area, or did you go and do something completely different while you were waiting for the next application period?
So I was definitely disappointed when I got the news, and I was sad about it for a day or two, because you try so hard, and then you get the news, and it's like, oh, this wasn't what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But you can't let stuff like that just stop you, slow you down. So I read the email that my professor said, and she gave some tips on my statement of intent, which is where I explain what I want to research and what my thesis is. And yeah, there's some things I could work on for that. So I read the email, and I thought about it a bit, and I just started reading some more books. And I think if I just sat there and I thought about the thesis a lot, it wouldn't have helped. I needed new material, new ideas, get a fresh start, turn the page. So I think that was the first thing I did, was just start opening up another book, rereading some stuff, reading some new stuff.
Good for you.
So at the moment, I put aside my old thesis and I'm kind of open to new ideas. Maybe I'll change it up a lot. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Good on you. That's such good character. I feel like like when you lose and you're beat down, it's really hard to get back up or carry on. But that's such a good tactic. Just take on more information and just continue to study what you love, and it helps. Like we said, like if you love it, it helps a lot. So what are you thinking about? What are you most excited for? Did you find any new creative content when you were reading new books and papers preparing for this new application? Was there any content that came up in your fresh studies that kind of made you excited or inspired your works that you're going to be putting in the application this time around?
I think I'm sticking with the same main idea about assembly sites and why they are located in one place or another.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're moved from the setting into a town, and there's some ideas I can play with it. But I think I still got the main core idea. But reading new papers, I think I'm more interested in a broader area, because earlier I was just focused on Iceland, but now I think I'm going to look at some Norwegian sites. But
Cool. I love that.
That's a little bit specific.
I love that.
It's a lot more things with Iceland to look at.
What's something about Norwegian culture or history that most people wouldn't know? Can you give us a little bit, like a little story?
Well, the period I'm looking at, the Viking age, so it's pretty early, and we don't have a lot of sources, but we know that people were gathering at outdoor arenas, like outdoor settings, and they would have their governments there, and they would make communal decisions as a group. So I think that was a really interesting part of their culture. That is what I'm trying to study, and they brought that practice over to Iceland, and they did some interesting synthesis there. So
that's so cool. Yeah, no, that's really cool.
It's a very different picture of the Vikings and what we usually think about. We think of them as violent, but
yeah,
they seem to be a little bit democratic.
The axes, right? Yeah. I was not expecting them to gather around for political discussions. Well, that's awesome. I really wish you the best of luck on those, on the reports. I know you're probably going to pour your heart into it. And hopefully, I know your odds will be good this time around. But I wanted to talk also about your tree planting. I know you're a tree planter, an avid tree planter, 9 seasons of tree planting in British Columbia. And there's different tree planting opportunities around the world for restoration. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your goal was with tree planting and what started you into that?
Yeah, so tree planting, I've done it for 9 seasons. I'm going again this summer, so I will have done it for 10 years, which is a pretty long time.
Yeah, wow.
Most people only do it for about 3 years if they stick around with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started in my second year of university, and the season starts in May, so it's really convenient for students. You can go to school and then immediately go to work.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of money in a pretty short amount of time, and I think it really clicked for me because I've always been a camper. I've always done canoe trips, so I'm very used to camping outside. And when you're a tree planter, you live out of a tent and you're served camp food. And you drive a truck to work every day, so it can be a little jarring for some people who are used to, creature comforts of the city, a shower every day, and Wi-Fi. So I really like the dirty aspect of it, and you're in the woods, you're away from everybody, away from your parents and the police. And
the police.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. That's great.
There's some fun bush parties here. Yeah, you can make a lot of money, and I think because it's piecework, you get paid based on how much work you put in, how many trees you plant. So you really have to push yourself. And for me, because I have a physical disability, that was really inspiring for me because I had to push against my body. I had to work with it in a way that I don't think I ever had to force myself to do. So I was always driven to exceed myself and get bigger numbers, plant more trees every day. And it was a really inspiring journey for me, I think.
That's amazing.
I learned a lot about myself just age, so.
That's awesome, Doug.
Yeah.
Good for you. I feel like there is so much of a pressure to grow. It's kind of like a catalyst, that kind of pressure and discomfort, especially being outside and outdoors. I've heard of so many people who are doing treks, like long distance trekking or ultra marathons, outdoor camping excursions, like night camping through the forest with nothing but a pack on their back. And it sounds to me like there's a lot that nature has to offer in terms of personal development or getting to know yourself a little better, putting that challenge on that, breaks you maybe more emotionally than legitimately. But I'm curious to know, since you were already camping for most of your life anyways, was it much different to camp out tree planting, or was it more so just the physical work that was more of a new challenge for you, or did you find it also a bit of something you had to adapt to living and camping in the forest in the particular areas you went to tree plant?
I think tree planting, you can become a lot more comfortable than if you were canoe camping or just, with a backpack, because a lot of tree planters will bring a car. I bought my car for many seasons, so I'm basically just car camping. Like, I got a lot of stuff in the back of my car. Some people will sleep in their van, like they converted their van into a makeshift RV, and they'll just sleep in the back of it. That keeps you dry, and that's kind of nice. But I would say it's easier because you don't have to cook for yourself.
Oh, okay.
And like, there's showers that are set up with running water and heated water and stuff. So it's not the worst. It's just, if you're used to sleeping in a sleeping bag outside, that's the only thing you really have to get adjusted to, is you're not used to camping.
Yeah.
So I know about being outside, if when you're working, you're in the woods alone for most of the day. Like, you don't really see other people.
Yeah.
You might see somebody in the distance, but they're in their own patch of land.
Yeah.
And you're kind of by yourself most of the time. So that's where the real introspection is. Because I think you're doing your repetitive, monotonous work, and you don't really think about it. It takes like 8 seconds to put a tree in and close the hole. So you should kind of slowly jogging in slow motion, and you're kind of just thinking. You're thinking about the entire year. You're thinking about a fight you had with somebody 3 months ago, that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
I think that's what real personal growth in tree planting, because you're alone with yourself for a lot of the day. And I think a lot of people don't succeed in tree planting because they can't keep those voices out and focus on the work. So you know what I mean? Like, you kind of have that stuff and it can slow you down, but you have to keep pushing yourself and planting. It's a really weird meditation exercise almost. It's not about the physical work.
Is there any skills or techniques that you learned to meditate through this kind of experience, or how did you handle it? Because that is actually one of the hardest parts of being alone outside of the technological world with social media and everything always in our faces, and there's so many ways to numb ourselves or distract ourselves from our internal worlds. So being able to work in an environment like that where you really are just stuck with yourself in isolation for a period of time, it would be hard for all those things to kind of come up. Was it kind of the first time things like that came up in that way for you, or do you feel like you've dealt with this experience in the past, and how do you deal with it?
I think for me, I think planting is kind of a big metaphor for life. Like, you're moving through life, you're working, and you're doing life, making trees grow. And if you slow down and you stop your flow, you sit down and you just think about something you're sad about, or you're on your phone, you're not going to plant a lot of trees, and you're not going to keep going, right? So I think a huge thing is just to keep going. Don't, it's okay to slow down a bit, but don't stop.
Yeah.
It's just something like just getting up in the morning and just cleaning your room a bit. So it can be really big things that can help you keep your momentum going. And I think, that's just one example of the metaphors for life that I think tree planting has. There's a lot of them. But I think in this case, it's not letting those little things slow you down, when all you need to do is, just keep going, keep the momentum going, and that alone can be very powerful.
Yeah, that's quite true. I feel like it is momentum. A lot of the times I'm dealing with something tough or something that's a block. Exercise or movement is actually really a great technique. And working on something like tree planting for yourself must be something so fulfilling and something you're so proud of because you know you're making a difference and giving back to the earth when you're planting the trees and restoring lands like that. That's awesome, Doug. Good on you. I love that. I remember, probably 9 seasons ago when you started second year university. I remember you were telling me to get into it, and I was like, "Oh, maybe." I'm so happy to see you're still doing it and you're consistent with it. Do you feel like you'll always be able to make time for tree planting as you start to progress in your career or start to get into teachers college and work towards that kind of career? Do you think you'll always make time for tree planting or something similar?
I think just being a high school teacher would be a wonderful, comfortable job for me. I'm not asking for too much in life, a house by the ocean with a big library is more than enough for me. And I think, just being a high school teacher would be a wonderful way to get that job. But I think also, because I read a lot, I think applying myself to an academic field and studying the Norse, really making a difference in that field, contributing, writing professionally. I think those are all things that I would be really proud to accomplish, which is why I've been inspired to pursue a graduate school. So I think that would be my main dream, to be a kind of academic professional writer or a creative writer of some kind. But
That's
I'm not asking for too much.
No, a very humble guy indeed. I think it's good to know that you've actually been able to grab everything you need from life as it is. I'm curious. I really want to know as well. I know that some people, when they go into education and history, a lot of teachers I've met have had hobbies related to their history classes. One university professor I recall had a background in archaeology, so they were actually able to go and discover artifacts that related to the field of history they were most interested in. So I'm curious if there's any cool opportunities in the history that you're working in and in the community that you have available in Calgary. Are there any kind of hobbies or missions or any extracurriculars that you've heard of or any dreams of activities you'd like to be involved in that relate to the history that you're interested in?
Well, I'm not in archaeology. I'm in history. And so for my officious reading, I don't really need to be on the safe or looking at any physical things. And what I'm looking at is the law. So most of that is found in the law books and translated manuscripts. But I would love the opportunity to go to one of the assembly sites and to look around at it, and for it to have been a place that I've studied. And I think really being there and looking around, I think that will give me an impression of why this was a significant place to these people that you could not get just from reading. So I think that will be something I would love to do someday. It wouldn't be necessary for my writing, but it would definitely be something to do. As for opportunities in Calgary, we're in the middle of the prairie, so there's not a lot of ancient history here, unfortunately. But I know there are some opportunities through school programs to go to archaeological sites. I've had some friends who've done that. They've gone to Portugal and Turkey and done excavations at sites there, and I think that's very cool.
That's amazing.
I'd like to do that someday.
What was the last bit, sorry?
I would love to do that if I get the opportunity, but there's not a lot of archaeological artifacts from the North because they lived in dirt houses and most of their stuff were made out of wood, so it dissolved.
Yeah, fair. That's so funny. Did they have any famous texts or any literature at all that's preserved in Iceland or Norway or any of your more favored historical land locations? Yeah,
there's actually Iceland really famous for the the early medieval literature. They wrote down a lot of sagas, which are really interesting because they're character narratives, and this is 1,000 years ago. There wasn't really anything like that being written at the time. And there's just these stories about individual men, Viking heroes, and they're just traveling around, getting into fights, reciting poetry.
Yeah.
It's a really, real interesting genre of literature. And I think it stands out because of how old it is, for how like psychological the characters feel.
Yeah.
The way it's written, almost like Hemingway. And yeah, I think the saga literature what really drew me to the Vikings in the first place, because I read some of these stories and I was just really blown away. Like, this is written in AD 900. It was crazy. So yeah, Iceland is very famous for those stories, and I totally recommend anybody to look up the Viking saga and read it for themselves, because they're very readable and they're actually kind of enjoyable.
That actually sounds great. I love stories, but never been told about these kinds of genres of stories till I caught up with you the other day. But I'm really curious if you have any stories that you could tell us, any like quick stories or like summaries of some of the stories that blew you away or like really got you intrigued by this genre in the first place.
Yeah, I think the main story that I like, the main Viking saga I like, is called Grettir's Saga. And it's about this Icelandic man. When he's a teenager, he gets outlawed, which means he cannot leave the island of Iceland. And anybody who helps him will be outlawed themselves, and there's a price on his head. So he has to live in the middle of Iceland by himself. And he survives for like 20 years. His brother helps him out sometimes, and he travels all around and he fights these ghosts and zombies and witches. It's really cool. And it's like a big personal journey of an outlaw. It's a reimagining of what would have been a very feared individual, like a lawless bandit. But all he'd actually really, he was just misunderstood. And that was the psychological interesting thing I saw.
That's really interesting.
They're very ahead of their time in that way, right? You think stories from that time, which is kings and knights, but no, it's about a common outlaw and farmers.
Were these just like interpretations that they had? Like, were the zombies and like the characters in the story, were they written to explain how they were perceiving just an individual, or were they writing it for the fictional kind of storytelling effects to kind of use it for entertainment?
Yeah, my interpretation is that it's because he's an outlaw, he exists in this place that's outside of society, outside of the human world. So he's partly in the unknown world, and that's where supernatural beings are. But there are also reflections on his inner psyche. Like, he fights a ghost at one time, which is very Jungian shadow archetype. I don't know if you know much about that, but it's very much a reflection of his dark side. And it's like, you're going to be, and he's the one who gives him the curse that he's going to be an outlaw. He's never going to increase in stature. He's going to be a wanted man with a price over his head for the rest of his life, and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, so it's kind of character and psychological aspects really drew me to that particular story, and I started seeing them in the other sagas as well. I was like, wow, there's a lot more to the Vikings than just, pillaging and so on.
No, that is so deep. Thanks for sharing that. I've never heard of that kind of story from so far back. I think it's really incredible to step into narratives from different times, different centuries. It's just crazy to think how similar we all were and how connected we all were across time. Because you always look back and you're like, oh, them in the past, they knew nothing. And there's a lot of mentality and storytelling around us being the most advanced nation and, the most advanced time for humans. And it's like, you read literature and you're like, actually, we're quite similar, eh?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think your interpretation about some of these psychological truths in ancient texts, when you're reading them, do you feel like you relate to these people heavily? Do you feel like you're fascinated by any kind of difference or like pre-development, like any kind of thoughts that they might have had that You can see how the future and evolution across time has kind of evolved some of their ideas or thoughts into what completely different styles and versions of reality today? Or do you feel like it is quite similar across the board? I guess I'm more curious to understand if there's anything that you've come across that was striking you as being so completely different or such a unique way of thinking.
I think a big thing reading the Vikings for me is just how much I relate to them, like how human they are. Reading the sagas, the text is very plain. It doesn't say a lot about what characters are thinking or feeling. It just says what they did. And you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit to put in a rich psychological light, which is clearly what's going on in a lot of these cases. And a lot of these stories are love stories. There's blood feuds. People are separated by oceans and outlawry. So there's a lot of that, and jealousy, and so many human emotions that shine through. But you kind of have to know how to look for it. It's not right there, written in the way we write about them today. Today, I think it's a lot more less subtle. I think.
Yeah.
In a lot of arts, like you have to know exactly how to feel and what to think. But back then it was a lot more plain. Here's what happened, and you can put it together what these people were feeling, and put yourself in their shoes. Like you promised you would marry this person, and then you've been outlawed, and then she's marrying somebody else, and now your reputation's on the line. You have to deal. It's really cool stuff.
That's really deep. That's a heartthrobber.
And like the psychological profiles they make and the way their mythology kind of ties in with that. Like you can kind of translate that into how we see ourselves today. Kind of with like mysticism and Jungian psychology. You can kind of translate it that way, and you can see that they had a rich way of looking at themselves and a way of understanding themselves, and you can kind of, it's the same, but it's very different. I think I see a lot both sides of what you're saying, but personally, the reason why I like it is because I relate to them, even though they're in a bit of a different framework. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It sounds like the text is just more open to interpretation. Is that what you're saying? Like, the text back from the histories that you're studying are just more this is what happened, and there's no need to over-explain. Maybe like today we maybe over-explain things a little too much or add too many fillers.
Yeah, maybe art nowadays doesn't, thinking about the way to put it, it respects the audience more. Modern art respects the audience less because it tells them how to think and what to feel. There's usually only one right interpretation, but I think good art, perhaps the sagas are good at, they should kind of lay the scene out flat. They don't, a lot of times somebody's obviously a bad guy, but it doesn't explicitly say that a lot of the time. Wow. And a lot of the characters are in very complex situations, and there's no one right answer to what they should do.
That's really powerful.
The psychological aspect. Who is this person, and is he a good person, and is he doing the right thing? Those are very rich themes.
I like that. I know that from my own, from meeting a couple film buffs. I've been exposed to different types of films from different parts of the world, and I recognized that the format and the way they express themselves, the cinematography, the expressiveness, and the even just like differences, like the amount of words used in a scene are so different to a lot of the Western English films that we listen to or watch in our sides of the world in the West. So I feel like it's really interesting I'd be interested to know, do you ever watch or study any kind of recent media from or art from regions like Iceland or Norway, those regions that you're studying ancient history around. And do you notice there's any correlation or similarities between the kind of content that was created in the art that was presented from the past in history? Is it similar, or has it evolved in Norway and Iceland still today?
That's a good question, because I went to Iceland. I went to a couple of museums, and I was wondering that myself. Like, what did modern Icelandic art look like? And can you really put that kind of label on it? And I don't think it has a lot to do with the Viking past. Like, that's a very long time ago, and there was a major religious change. I think a lot of the art and the aesthetic of the northern region, Scandinavia, Iceland, a lot of it is very Protestant, very austere, kind of arctic, which is a really cool vibe, but it's definitely very different from the Viking past, and I'm not quite sure how to bridge that gap yet. I haven't really studied anything in between. And I've been trying to read Icelandic books, because Iceland has a really big literature culture. And I watched a couple Icelandic movies, and there's definitely a vibe to them. There's definitely a cinematography that embraces the landscape in a really cool way. They're typically very slow paced and psychologically driven. So maybe if there's any kind of connection, I would say maybe it's in the overall aesthetic that the sagas might have and how they describe events that might translate into how stories are told. Because if you ever go to Iceland or Norway, it's very kind of remote. The landscape is very imposing. There's not a lot of trees, and you're kind of isolated in your farm. So I feel like there's only one real way to talk about art if you're living in an environment like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the environment, how you see it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm also interested to hear about how Iceland would be... Oh, I just forgot my question. Sorry, I was so involved in listening to you. I just got excited. I was going to ask, actually. Thanks. Here, I'm back. I was so wrapped up in what you're saying, Doug. It's so interesting. I'm loving myself here. It's so interesting. I'll have one more question, and then I'll wrap us up, because I know I'm taking I could talk to you all day, but let's wrap it up. The question I have for you to end us off is, when you're considering the type of art in New Zealand, in Iceland or Norway, especially since it sounds like you've dabbled in a little bit of the more recent art as well as the historical arts, does it seem to be related more to the theme or the energy of nature? Like, when you experience camping and you're working in tree planting environments for months at a time out in nature planting trees, I feel like you have a pretty good idea of the flow of nature and just the way things go, the natural pace of the earth, and the contrast between how things are when you're living out in nature and then returning back to the city. And I'm curious to understand if you believe there's any correlation to places like Iceland and Norway in terms of how they express themselves through their art versus how we might express ourselves through art in places like Canada or Australia, due to the pace of nature, if it's related to nature.
Nature, I think one part of nature that Nordic are kind of focusing on is being an exile in the landscape, being alone and isolated in a vast wilderness, a vast landscape. And, the outlaw sagas are definitely about that, because they're about men who are, outlawed in the wilderness alone. And then there's some Anglo-Saxon poetry, which is England, but they're kind of the same culture. And there's a lot of men who are sailing out alone. And I think that really resonated with me, because, I'm working out in the woods alone. Even though I come back to camp and everybody's in camp, I spend most of the day alone in the woods planting trees. So can get a little bit lonely. So I think that kind of resonated in a romantic way with that kind of art. As for Canadian art, I'm not too huge on Canadian artists at the moment, but definitely there's a lot of natural painters and writers like Farley Mowat and Tom Thompson. Those would be my classic Canadian artists. And they would create an idea of landscape that I think might resonate a little bit with them. Maybe Lawrence Harris a little bit more because he's done a lot of Arctic paintings, and it's like you're alone in the Arctic, and it's just these rolling hills, and his paintings really reflect that. And I think that translates very well to what we see in Iceland and Norway. So yeah,
environment,
both Canadian.
art. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Thank you so much, Doug, for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure to have you. I can't wait to have you on again. Hopefully when you finish your reports and you're on to graduate school, we'll be able to talk to you again and kind of see where you've gone next.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for calling me. I'll really get to hear from you again.
Yes, yes.